going to get my reference photo up. Okay, I gotta do my password to get into my iPad. Okay. Okay, so if I could just have a little bit of like, I'm gonna make myself available for the majority of the times for like responding to any specific needs. Like if you're like, I am looking at something in my reference photo that I just don't have an idea of what is the clear path for it. Let me work it out with you and help you. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to draw my like middle range, and then like I said, like the background with some of these smaller buildings with less detail, as well as getting some of my reflective lake water happening. So that's going to get me to the point where come Monday, I'm really ready to like tackle more of my foreground, which has more of my 2-point perspective building and my reindeer and people. So it is exciting. As I look around and I see everyone's drawings developing, it's so fun. The colors are really starting to become real rich and saturated. A quality control question is, do I have very many layers of colored pencil? Am I seeing lots of the paper texture still? If, depending on what side of the paper you use, one side has more texture than the other. So if you find that you have a lot more visible texture, that just means you're going to have to layer it up more and kind of work it into those grooves of the paper. But like I always do, I look through my colored pencils and I identify the colors that I'm going to be using. And in my drawing, I've got some red buildings, so that'll be fun to create some visual contrast with color of my red buildings against the green grassy area. So I'm just pulling out colors that I see. If you are lacking some range of color, be sure to go look in the drawers to find what you potentially may need. So I'm putting my colors down. Again, I'm always going to be relying on that navy blue and dark brown as well. They are my dark values. I got a nice range of greens here, and then that pop of that chartreuse. I think that's going to be good. Oh yeah, and then I've got to do some reflection in my water as well. So let's see what I can create. So I put down this layer of blue for my water, so I'm first kind of addressing that. This may or may not apply to your design if you have water. All right. All right, so I got a little water there. Now I'm looking at my reflection. I think what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do the water right now. And for respect of those who, if they are following along or taking in what I'm saying, if you could keep your conversations just real quiet so I don't feel like I have to like shout, I'd appreciate that. But I want to try to maximize addressing some parts of drawings that maybe everybody's going to run into that challenge. So I'm going to do the tree area first. And I want you to think about drawing your trees the same way that we talked about drawing hair with your charcoal portrait. So hear me out on that. You're drawing something that is three-dimensional and has form. So instead of thinking of the individual leaves and branches, I want you to think about the overall shape of the form you're drawing. And then you'll work in your way towards adding details at the end. So really think of it like a formula of, I'm going to look at the overall three-dimensional form. I'm going to pick a mid-tone. So like I'm doing trees, and there's just lots of them that are clumped together. So instead of thinking of them as individual trees, I'm going to kind of fill that whole space as, and I'll show you on my screen here what part I'm working on. I'm working on this middle ground area that is like this like mass of trees. So I'm looking at it as an overall kind of shape that it's creating together. Then I'm going to break into looking at, so I'm going with a mid-tone. So I'm going to go with like a grass green, kind of middle of the road. Then I'm going to take my navy blue or my indigo blue, and I'm going to look at all the dark values, and I'm going to build up those values in those areas, and I'm going to layer that up with the light touch. Then I'm going to shift gears, and I'm going to look at all the highlighted areas, and I'm going to go with like a lighter green towards maybe even a little yellow to build up the value, so that I've got my mid-tone, my darkest shadow values, and then I've got my highlights. Then I'm going to go in and start to individually add a bit of texture. And what I find really works well when you're adding texture like leaves or bushes or any sort of shrubbery or foliage is to do a little more of that like scumbling technique, where it's a little more of like a squiggly line area for those final mark making, so that you're not drawing, like I'm not going to draw individual leaves. It's going to be more just like thinking in terms of more impressionism. If you think of some of those painters that it was like how the value changed on the surfaces that they were creating versus just real detailed representational. So it's going to be a little more impressionistic. So that's how I'm going to go about doing that. And I'm trying to remember if I used this green. Well, we shall see. I think I did. Yeah, it's matching up. So I'm just going with, I would even say this is a little lighter than I would have maybe like yesterday versus today. I'm giving myself a little like questioning my choices. But I think one of the reasons why I went with this yesterday was because I wanted to differentiate it from my background shrubbery that's further away, because remember, things that move further away become cooler toned. So I'm using some color theory to create the sense of value and depth and space in my drawing. And I'm just doing one solid layer here, and I might even like kind of add some height here where I see some taller trees. So I'm just kind of following the form, and we'll work our way towards details. So we kind of have to have some patience there. So I'm doing lighter green, but then I think I'm going to pick like a grassier green to go on top of it. I'm a little lost with my those weird like high like wooden legs on my building. Kind of adding a little bit underneath there. Okay, and then going around the head here. All right, so that is kind of my first layer. And I just did like the overall kind of mass and form that it creates. Now I'm going to go with the middle of the road. I'm going with I'm going to go with the grass green next. So this is layer 2. Remember, like where I'm finding that I land on is adding about 6 to 7 layers of colored pencil, and that really starts to feel real saturated and really covers the paper beautifully. So this is layer 2, and I'm just going over the whole mass of the trees that are clumped together. I haven't added any details. All right. I noticed with my demo video yesterday that I had zoomed in, and then I was shaking the table a little bit, so I'm hoping that I might need to focus, get the camera in focus if I zoom in. Give it a minute to catch up with me. Okay. And this is just layer 2, going over all these areas. Once I work on my building, which I'll do that on Monday, I'm going to be probably coming back and changing some of the details underneath this building. So I'm going to put primarily my focus in this area right here of my drawing. Okay, so now I feel like I've got a nice mid-tone happening here. So I'm going to add the navy blue. So I'm just looking at my reference photo and I'm just adding the navy blue wherever I see dark value. This is where I go back to my college painting professor and I do some like squinting just to really kind of see where I see those darker values. All right, so this is like layer 3 happening here. And it's happening kind of up along here as well. We'll work our way towards details. And I'm even going a little bit in that scumbling kind of varied motion with my colored pencil. So I'm layer 3, so it is starting to blend together. So I'm just looking at where I see darker value. And then I could even make it a little richer with the darkness. So where I see it's particularly dark, I'm adding dark brown. And I may go a little back and forth to kind of experiment, or you could say play with the value there. So creating depth. Notice I have not put any black into my composition. So I may or may not. I tend to not use it with colored pencil. You could be a little bit more strategic and you could plan to use some of the black of the paper. So that could be an advantage as well. All right. Adding a little dark value on the edge here. Okay, now I'm going to switch gears. So as you see my mass of trees, I've got a mid-tone and then I have the dark value. Now I'm going to hit it up with the highlights, and this is going to start to create more dimension. All right. So I'm just, wherever I see the highlighted areas, I'm just putting some of that in there. It's even kind of in the foreground here. And then I'm going to start to add some more specific details and even creating, so some of these evergreens I can see the trunks of the trees. So I'm going to include that in my kind of this middle ground. I'm kind of going a little bit towards the foreground here for a minute. And I'm just hitting it up. So I'm using that chartreuse. It makes for a nice, like, kind of yellowy green happening. And then I will make my way towards adding some white to it. Now, I think I'm going to add a little more tree edge there. And I'm going to see about zooming in so that you can kind of have a view of what's happening here with my trees here. So you can see that I'm starting to kind of define different trees within the mass group. So taking that a little further, I'm actually going to even look for, there's a Tuscan red that I might blend with the dark brown to do some of these tree branches. So there's one tree here and you can see the trunk of it. And then there's also another one that I think I'm going to add right about here. I need to add a little more foliage. Now I need to address this background area. And I think how I'm going to do that is kind of just putting in the grassy area, which then I can add more details afterwards. So you see I put the two trunks in there. Now I need to add, it's like these evergreens get a little kind of scraggly. So I do need to add a little more detail there. But I think before I do that, I want to add some of that background grass around there. So I'm going to just go ahead and put that in there. It'll just kind of help make the foreground area pop out a little bit more. And then that goes into more water here. I need to add more of the lake area. So here's just that light layer one. I'll be adding more to it. So I need to just kind of get it in before I do much more. All right, and then I might add a little bit, there's a little bit of an orangey tone in the grass back in the background. Okay. All right, going back to that grassy area, or the tree trunk area. So if you have any like noticeable like tree trunks in your compositions, you'll notice the light source. Like one side of the tree trunk will be lighter than the other. So I'm going to see if I'm zoomed. I think I'm zoomed in as far as I can go. So I'm going to do that here with my tree trunk. So on one side I'm using the navy blue and I'm just trying to add a little bit of a dark shadow to it. And then I'm going to hit it up with, I think I'll go with this color, this goldenrod, just to give it a little bit of a highlight on the opposite side of that shadow that I just put in with the navy blue. And then I'm going to add some of these kind of sparse little fluffs of evergreen needles. So here I'm adding a little bit of that goldenrod. I'm going to see if I bring it up closer to the camera, if you can see how I created right here. I put navy blue on one side of the dark brown branch, and then I put that goldenrod. So it just creates a little bit more dimension. I'm going to do the same thing on the other little branch. And then grabbing that navy blue. Okay. All right. Now, it's like I might even try, because I want to make the details of these tree branches really stick out. So I'm actually adding a little white on top of that grass in the background, because it's a little bit more like of a pale green. So I'm going to just add a lighter tone because it's going to make these two trees kind of stand out. And then I'm going to go with that lemon peel green over it one more time. So it's all about experimenting with value and where you have dark value and highlights. Okay. All right. Getting those highlights up close. Now I'm going to grab that dark green again to make my little sparse evergreen portions. A little bit harder to see. But now I'm grabbing the navy blue to make a dark value underneath there. So I've gotten to the point where I'm adding more details to specific parts of my trees. I'm going to hit a little bit of highlights with that chartreuse. I like blues. I want to pull it closer to me, but... And I'm going to add some more details here. Actually, I feel like I need more of that background to be solid to make it pop. And I'm going to take the navy blue to kind of create some darker values. I just spotted, like in my background, I've got a boat, which I didn't realize I had. I'm going to do the same thing on this little tree that's got a little bit of details kind of popping out. This time I use navy blue, and I'm going to go with the green. Okay. Kind of keep that simple. Feeling like I'm going to kind of work on this area here that has a lot of details in it, and they're more highlights. And I'm going to do that scumbling kind of moving around because I've got evergreens and I'm just hitting them up, just trying to create that texture. So I'm just really putting that chartreuse on. Nope, this is not chartreuse. Yeah, this is chartreuse. In that squiggly kind of way. And then in the midst of the dark valley or the highlights, I'm going to pop in kind of squiggly lines with the navy blue, because where you have highlights, you'll also have dark values. Okay. And then kind of accentuating the like darker value in that shrubs that are further away. Yes, you may. And then I'm going to grab white to kind of hit up, and I'm doing more like little circles, like individual parts of the evergreen that are really catching the light, knowing that this is going to be that reflective body of water. And I even would recommend incorporating a bit of yellow into the yellow is not loving mixing as much with anything. Do I even see it? I'm pushing really hard. But it's kind of coming. I like how the white really makes for some highlights. And then I feel like this needs to kind of go greener towards the bottom where it gets a little darker. And I'll hit a little more white. And I'm going to bring more white around. And I'm doing scumbling. That really kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. So I'm going to put a little green on top of there to blend it in. And I am finding something that is working real nicely for me for some of these trees. I'm just doing more like little thicker, it's almost like polka dots that I'm adding. And it must just be, it's not an evergreen, so it's more of like a leafy tree. So I'm just kind of adding some of that. So you can see how I'm getting some details here, like from like evergreens, which kind of keep, I think I might even put a little bit of like seeing some evidences of branches between my brown and my navy blue. So you can see once you kind of put down those like value range of that mid-tone dark value highlight, then you can start getting more like adding details the way that I'm doing that.
Can I use the bathroom?
Yes, quickly. Yeah, the white sitting on top really is doing a nice job for like, I don't know what type of tree it is, but it's kind of serving as like reflective lights. Like the leaves are reflecting that light. So then in opposite, I'm adding some little polka dots with the dark navy blue as well for some of those tree areas. Because I do want there to be a difference of details. So take note of this, everyone. My background shrubbery, it's less detailed. And then as you can see in this middle ground here, it's starting to have more specific details to it, which is going to create that visual effect of space and depth. So experiment with that. I'm going to add another little tree branch sticking out here because I kind of just noticed it. And hitting a little highlight on one side and then doing darker value on the other. And then I'm going to do a few little branches being highlighted like that. And then I'm going to grab green and kind of fill that in. As it also kind of goes into my area that I just noticed. I have a boat in my background on the lake. All right. And if you need to, you can come up and look at mine up close too, if you want to have a little more of a, to see how I'm creating the difference between what my background looks like and my trees look like in the middle ground. Then it's kind of informing me that I want to make my background trees even cooler tones, so I'm adding more navy blue and shadows because it's just making sense to me with what I'm seeing. So know that as you kind of develop an area, you can always go back and add because you're more visually informed on what has evolved and developed. So it's an ongoing process with all areas. And then I would just kind of keep this going. I'm finding that the white is really being a nice effective addition to my trees. But these are definitely moving further back. This over a bit and make this have a little darker value. Okay. That is still really sticking out. I'm going to try to blend a little bit of this white that I got a little carried away with. Tone it down. That's better. All right. So I still have these buildings. I'm looking to see where we're at for time. In the background, so I'm going to address them by just doing some real simple basic layers because I kind of want to get this area. So what I have happening here is it's kind of all this area is wrapping around, but I haven't addressed this portion. So I want to do that because that's going to inform me to know how to balance things out and know when I'm done with that area. So I'm just gonna add some red to that one building that I see down there. And it is a 2-point perspective building, but very basic. And it's gonna just be so simple. There's also like a little red, there's a little red building that kind of goes into the lake here. And then, again, I've got some artistic license to decide what to keep, what to omit. I'm gonna develop my green around here, and there's like a little like driveway, little road. So I'm just kind of addressing that area that I kind of skipped. I'm just putting a solid layer of the grass because I feel like it needs to get more solid. You sure may. All right. And then what color is that building? It's like a tannish. I'm gonna go with gray. Gray and then a white roof because it's reflecting. So I'm not doing too much detail here for my buildings because that's gonna give the impression that it's further away. We want more of the details to be happening here because of that, like, that illusion of depth and space. So here's kind of a roof, and there's a bright roof here, so I'm just adding that. And then I see I'm going to add a little bit of dark value kind of underneath the roof, creates some shading. So you can see how little details I have in the background there, but it's enough. Like I don't need a ton more. So just be mindful of that. I think I'm also going to create, there's like a little windy driveway, so I'm going to kind of create that appearance of the road happening there. Keeping it real basic, thinking just in terms of like, maybe I got that, I used gray, now I'm kind of hitting it up a little bit here and there, not consistently, but just using some white. And then I'm going to take the navy blue in certain areas just to create some darker value. Kind of makes it feel a little more three-dimensional. Maybe I'll add a little door. So feel free to come up and take a closer peek at, like, because when you kind of see it, you're like, oh, it's pretty simple. But I'm just missing, I need to add some reflective greens in the water and some like navy blues. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to feel like I've done enough for today. For kind of giving you some more tips. And if there's specific questions you're having, please, please, please let me know so I can kind of work with you. So what I'm seeing for the reflection in the water of the trees is they're almost like linear, like layers. So I'm just kind of mimicking that mark making with my colored pencil, knowing that I'm going to add a little navy blue into there too. Now I'm going to switch to a lighter green because it gets a little bit lighter over here. So I'm just thinking like an abstract artist again. All right, now I got my navy blue out because I could leave some of this black in here. It works in my favor. I'm going to grab a little of that chartreuse. It just really seems to work out nicely for a little bit of highlights where the trees are. I'm trying not to overcomplicate it, keep it simple. Need to add a little more like kind of pops of blue. And I see like lavenders in here too, so I'm gonna kind of add those. They're a little more, almost they look a little smoky. Alright. And I'm gonna grab, I might even do a little gray in there. Alright, and I can keep kind of developing that. That kind of looks like light green. Okay. Alright, that kind of looks weird. I need to kind of tone that down maybe. Alright, so I'll kind of slowly work on, I kind of added something that I would say I'm not going to regret it because I'm going to fix it, but it's just kind of standing out a little like an eyesore. But maybe I can make it, tone it down. I'm getting there. Getting there. I don't know. Okay, so I'll just zoom it out for now. So there's where I am landing. So I didn't put a ton of details. I might add a little more information there and get this a little more like solid. But, you know, the more details you put towards the front, that visual depth is going to really come out of your drawing. So I'm available to answer any questions or let you keep moving towards completing things.